Hello and welcome to the Comic Cave. I'm Ramsey, aka Captain Away, and today I'm finally talking about the big one. That's right, it's time for the 2011 to 2016 series, Batman, part of DC's The New 52. Unlike much of the rest of the DC universe, Batman and his little Bat family would actually keep a lot of their history intact going into the New 52 reboot. The specific details would often get changed, but in general you could trust that more or less the characters had a familiar history. This was particularly true of recent history, especially from the point that Grant Morrison had taken over Batman. This would include events like the revelation of Batman's son Damian with Ra's al Ghul's daughter Talia, who would then go on to become the latest Robin. Or Batman's apparent death in Final Crisis, which actually instead involved him time traveling and discovering that the future was bleak. Post-apocalyptic even. This then led to him creating Batman Incorporated once he returned home, and more or less, the actual events of that comic would remain vaguely canon, at least according to what we learned during the New 52 version of that series, and from Grayson, which I probably shouldn't have covered without talking about Batman Incorporated first, but whatever. With the advent of the New 52, horror comic writer Scott Snyder and Spawn artist Greg Capullo were brought together to continue the Dark Knight story with a fresh new face. And they came out swinging. I've already covered a bunch of the event stories from their time on the series, including the Court of Owls saga, Night of the Owls, Death of the Family, and the Zero Year. So I will be skipping over those parts of the stories for the most part here, but you can always go watch my videos on those to get a bigger picture. I'm trying not to make these videos 1,000,000 hours, okay? I know they're long. I'm trying my best. But the series itself still deserves to be looked at in its entirety as a complete thing of its own, because it's definitely that. And whether you like it or not, it has certainly made its mark on the history of Batman. So let's see just how it did that and take this away. The comic opens on a jailbreak. Well, an asylum break? I mean, it's a bunch of Bat's baddies breaking out of Arkham Asylum, kicking us right off with our first glimpse of the New 52 versions of so many characters. I love how Professor Pig safety pinned a name tag to his chest. Don't get too excited though, this will be pretty much all we'll see of most of these characters. At least in this series. And many that we do see again, like Riddler, will look drastically different when they come back. Weirdly enough, Batman finds himself getting help from the Joker, but that's because this isn't an actual jailbreak, and that's not actually the Joker. It's Dick Grayson in disguise, using a special mask that will reappear throughout the series, as Batman was investigating a guard at Arkham and the guard sprung the inmates on Batman to give himself a chance to escape, with Nightwing working as a sort of inside man for Bats. This will not get referenced at all in the Nightwing series, but I'm sure that's fine. The point is, this opening of Batman being in familiar territory, being in control, being ahead of his opponents, taking care of business, is a stark contrast from the spiraling out of control that's about to happen as a new enemy appears in the form of the Talon, the lethal assassin working for the seemingly mythical Court of Owls. The Court completely smashes Batman's world, throwing him out of a window as Bruce Wayne, kidnapping him and forcing him to run their underground labyrinth where he ingests drug-laced water, and nearly taking over his entire city in the course of a single night as they unleash dozens of resurrected Talons from decades past, and hundreds of balloons to bomb the city. As I've said, I've covered the events of that story already, but I do want to make note of one important part that I haven't mentioned before. When Batman escapes the underground labyrinth of the Court of Owls, he washes up in Gotham Bay, where he nearly dies, but is rescued by a young woman. Rather than be grateful though, Batman yells at her and tells her to stay out of this. Despite him referencing having talked to her before, he's actually referring to events that are shown to us in a flashback in a later issue. Issue 12, which is drawn by Becky Cloonan, making it the first issue of Batman drawn by a woman in history. In 2012. It took 70 years for that to happen. That's insane. Just me? Okay. The issue introduces us to Harper Row, which is this girl's name, even though it sounds like a neighborhood in Gotham. We also meet her brother Cullen, and their father, some drunk criminal asshole that apparently Batman put away as a favor to Harper, no matter how much he'll try to deny it. Harper is some kind of tech genius, and after Batman saves her and her brother from some hate mongers who are attacking them due to Cullen being gay, she becomes obsessed with helping Batman. Being an electrical engineer for the city, she's also able to track down Batman's power boxes that allow him to turn off security cameras when he's in an area. She attempts to help him maintain those boxes, even though Batman is less than appreciative of her help. Another notable story from the Owl Saga is A Tale of Mr. Freeze. It's a sort of update of the Batman animated series episode Heart of Ice that created a new origin for Freeze that proved to be so popular that it actually replaced the origin he had in the comics with the one from the episode. The same story is updated further here, moving Dr. Freeze out of GothCorp and into Wayne Enterprises, and changing his wife Nora's story from an incurable disease to a heart condition that can be cured with modern surgery. The only problems he's facing are resurrecting her from being cryogenically frozen, a challenge that leads to him creating the serum that allows the Court of Owls to resurrect their talons, and dealing with a millionaire who just doesn't understand him and wants to shut down his project. Only this time that millionaire is Bruce Wayne himself, and it is because of Bruce that Freeze suffers his accident and becomes the walking snowman that he is. But the reason for that is because in this story, Nora isn't actually Freeze's wife. She's a woman that was frozen before Freeze was even born, and he actually wrote his doctoral thesis on her, and only came to work at Wayne Enterprises so he could be near her. The story heavily implies that he developed a sick fascination with frozen women after his mother fell into the ice when he was a child, especially since he pushed her in again after she was recovered the first time, because he's a messed up little kid. I'll admit the story is pretty good, but it also bothers me a lot. Heart of Ice made Freeze such an interesting and relatable villain. This story makes him just another psychopath again, which I get is probably better for the long run. It makes more sense to be able to use him as a recurring villain if he's not just a twisted anti-hero, and instead a actual full-on bad guy. But it's also disappointing to have him changed in this way. It takes away a lot of what was most interesting about his character. Once the Night of the Owls is put to an end, we immediately move on to Death of the Family, another major Bat Family crossover. This story sees Joker returning to Gotham after a year of being missing, not seen since the Dollmaker cut off his face in Detective Comics #1. When he returns, he shows up to the GCPD where he causes a blackout and then proceeds to just casually walk around snapping people's necks, because now he can apparently see in the dark and has superhuman strength. The event is written and presented very creepily, but it would also require superhuman abilities from Joker that he's never exhibited before. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but maybe it's just that I don't like the Joker? Joker's goal was to get his face back so he could wear it stapled to his face all icky-like. And once he's done that, he goes on television to announce that he's going to kill Mayor Hattie, using a guy named John Claridge as a puppet to deliver the message. John is the son of the deceased Henry Claridge, which, as Batman points out, is a reference to Joker's very first appearance in Batman #1, the original Batman #1, from 1940. The following moments where Joker manages to kill Hattie despite intense police and Batguard by having already poisoned him at an earlier point, and his next appearance at the reservoir, are references to the story Batman, the Man Who Laughs, which reimagined Joker's first appearance for the post-Crisis on Infinite Earths era of DC Comics, as a sort of sequel to Batman Year One. But in that story, Batman blew up the water supply for the city to prevent everyone from being poisoned by the Joker. Here, Joker blows up the dam himself, saying that he's trying to cut to the chase because he has something else to tell Batman. And what he wants to say is that he knows Batman's secret identity, as well as the secret identities of the entire Bat family. He even claims to keep the info in a tiny little black book. The idea is that, in the early days of their fights, Joker once somehow clung to the Batboat as it made its way back to the Batcave. And the only indication Bats had of this happening was a single Joker playing card he found in the water near the boat later that night. Batman doesn't believe Joker though, because as Bruce Wayne, he had then gone to Arkham Asylum to confront Joker with this card, and Joker looked at him but didn't see. And Bruce realized that Joker didn't actually want to know Batman's secret identity, because doing so would ruin his fun. This doesn't stop Joker from kidnapping Alfred, or torturing the entire Bat family with possibly identity-revealing information, but as I've said, I covered that in another video. The story ends with Batman confronting Joker in the very cave system that the Batboat would have traveled through, but Batman confronts Joker with the fact that the villain simply couldn't hold on. Not because he was unable to, but because he didn't want to, reiterating that Joker doesn't want to know the truth. Batman also claims to have figured out who the Joker really is, but when he attempts to tell the Joker freaks out and breaks free, falling to his apparent doom down into a long cavern. He leaves behind his face and his little black book, which turns out to be completely blank. We move on to a long flashback as we enter the 0 year, which is intended to be the year leading up to the Justice League forming, as Bruce Wayne first returns from his training overseas and begins to fight crime in Gotham. The 0 year probably was developed as a need to tell stories that didn't contradict the apparent death of the Justice League and Forever Evil. But Snyder really runs away with the idea, taking us through essentially 3 separate stories set in the 0 year. The first brings back the classic Red Hood, essentially expanding the original story from Detective Comics 168, that gave the Joker a pre-Joker criminal identity of Red Hood. In the 0 year, Red Hood is a Joker-like criminal mastermind facing off against a pre-Batman Bruce Wayne. Their conflict evolves until Bruce takes on the Batman persona and they end up battling it out in Ace Chemical, where Hood takes a plunge into some chemicals, hinting at him eventually becoming the Joker. Batman then faces off against another old Batman villain, Dr. Death, who turns out to be working for Edward Nygma, and together the two villains conspire to break the dams during a superstorm and flood the city. Batman, despite his best efforts, is unable to stop them and ends up being knocked out during the superstorm and nearly dies. Similar to what we saw happen during the Court of Owls story though, Batman ends up being rescued by a Gotham family, the Thomases, and their son Duke will be a recurring character throughout the series. We first meet Duke attempting to sharpen his brain with puzzle books in order to meet the Riddler's challenge of creating a riddle too complicated for the Riddler to solve. I do have a longer video about the 0 year if you want more information, so for now I'm going to move back to the present. For this period of the comic, this mostly involved various individual stories of Batman dealing with the loss of his son. Because, yeah, bit of a spoiler here for Batman Incorporated, but Damon gets killed in that story. Following that, Batman dives into his role with reckless abandon, and it takes some intervention from Harper Row to help him regain his senses. There's also a fun story full of references where Bruce Wayne goes on a crime spree. Wait, that can't be Bruce Wayne. Someone said the name Martha and he didn't break down crying. Sure enough, it turns out to be Clayface, who has evolved to not only be able to look like other people, but actually take on their DNA as well. So Clayface, as Bruce, goes on a crime spree to frame Wayne for the whole thing. To help achieve this, he even captures Bruce Wayne and Lucius Fox in a garbage smasher on the detention level of Wayne Enterprises. Did I say detention level? I'm sure it's just a regular garbage smasher. The kind all totally not evil corporations have. They're able to escape and not get crushed to death thanks to Lucius having thrown away a prototype Batman Beyond suit. And just in case you missed the reference, Lucius says that the design wouldn't be cost effective for at least 20 years, to match approximately the time for Batman Beyond to start. During all of these stories, Batman Eternal was also running, a year-long event that saw numerous changes to Batman's world. These include Commissioner Gordon being thrown in jail, Catwoman becoming a mob boss, Harper Row becoming the superhero Bluebird, Bruce losing Wayne Manor, Arkham Asylum closing and reopening in Wayne Manor as Arkham Manor, and Alfred's daughter showing up. Yeah, he has a daughter apparently. She's yet another character lost to tide in time thanks to the reset that came with Crisis on Infinite Earths. But Snyder brings her back here to rejoin the Bat Team after Alfred was hit with a fear toxin during Batman Eternal. And her first adventure with us is a doozy, as immediately we launch into the entire Justice League attacking Batman for no clear reason. At least no clear reason until we finally manage to learn that somehow they all got infected with Joker toxin. Batman, being Batman, though, had systems in place to confront the entire league, and manages to get the upper hand enough to capture them all and begin curing them from the toxin. But that was all part of the Joker's latest plan anyway, as he just needed the Justice League out of the way for a time, so he could launch his latest attack. And he shows up now having somehow grown a new face, but he still has his old face, somehow. Despite Duella Dent supposedly finding it in Catwoman, where she began wearing it and calling herself the Joker's daughter, and would continue wearing it for a long time after this, including in New Suicide Squad and Red Hood and Arsenal. But her character kinda sucks, honestly, so better to ignore that probably. Joker captures and knocks out Batman, and when Bats wakes up again, it's to a 28 days later world where Joker has gassed the city with his new Joker toxin that turns people into rage-filled zombies. He also seems to actually know Bat's secret identity now, as he uses Joe Chill, the man who killed Bruce's parents, to be the patient zero for the new toxin, and turns Chill's hospital ward into a recreation of Crime Alley. Which also gives us an additional cameo from Duke Thomas, as he and his family are trapped in the ward for some reason, and serve as stand-ins for the Waynes as Joe is forced to play out his crime once again. Joker also breaks into the Batcave, which is still there despite Bruce living in a high-rise in the city now, rather than out of Wayne Manor. And there he steals all of Batman's wonderful toys from out of the Batcave, so we can get a classic Keaton reference with a lovely Joker parade through the town. I fucking love that dinosaur. Seriously. That T-Rex is goals. The overarching story here is that Joker is an immortal who has always been a part of Gotham. He became immortal after discovering a microscopic creature that they'll take to calling Dionysium. Supposedly, this was the same substance that went into the Lazarus pits used by Ra's al Ghul, or the Electrum used by the Court of Owls to revive their talons. But Batman discovers that what really happened is that after Joker's fall and death of the family, he washed up in a cave with a corrupted version of the Dionysium, which repaired his body and regrew his face. Batman grabs a sample of the Dionysium in order to create a cure to the latest Joker toxin, which Julie is able to pull up from out of the cave. But before Batman can escape, Joker shows up and the two literally battle to the death as the cave explodes around them from bombs Joker had set to keep Batman out. I'll explain more about that all in a later video, but for now I'm trying to get on to the next part of the story. With Batman dead and the city recovered from Joker's Endgame, the Powers Corporation buys up Wayne Enterprises, including their control over Batman Incorporated, in order to build a brand new Robo-Bat suit. And the person they decide to have pilot the suit and be the new Batman? Jim effin' Gordon. Jerry Powers, head of Powers Corp, convinces Gordon to be the new Batman, appealing to him as a former Marine, a background that I believe was first given to Gordon in year 1, and by giving him the chance to keep the rookie recruits originally being considered for the role from having to risk their lives. So Gordon gets back in shape and attempts to quit smoking, requiring some help on that front from nicotine patches and candy cigarettes, and Powers suits him up. His gear consists of a very Batman-light undersuit, a batarang-firing gun that seems to be able to lock onto targets, and, most importantly, the bunny armor. Seriously, it looks like a bunny. He's Bunny Man now. Most importantly, it comes in a variety of colors, including Dark Knight Returns, 70s Batman, Zero Year Batman, and, best of all, Zur-En-Arr Batman. You should definitely go with that one, Gordy. They also hook up Batman with a massive Bat blimp and a Bat 18-wheeler, though the truck only really gets used once when Gordon calls it forth from out of the Bat blimp to crush a superpowered bad guy. R.I.P. Bat Truck. Working with Gordon is Julia Pennyworth, using the assumed name Julia Perry, and Daryl Gutierrez. They work from the Bat blimp and provide remote support as Gordon is in the field. The entire story arc here is one story focusing on some street-level thugs that Gordon has previously arrested, now somehow gaining superpowers. Maggie Sawyer, the current commissioner, finds that these powers come from a freaky little seed planted in the bloodstream of the users, given to them by a guy named Bloom. Bloom has used the seeds on himself to give himself powers, and during a press conference about the new Batman, Bloom somehow steals the Bat blimp and crashes it into Powers Tower and assaults all the guests. Gordon and Julia just barely manage to fight him off, but Gordon is forbidden from going after Bloom, as the intention of the new power-sponsored Batman program is that he works as part of the police force, and the police want to handle Bloom themselves. Gordon attempts to convince them to give him one shot at taking down Bloom, and when they finally give him that chance, he does manage to capture the bad guy. But also, he doesn't. Because it seems Bloom gave a bunch of others the same powers as him, and had them wear his outfit. So there's suddenly a ton of Blooms walking around the city. And they free the Bloom Gordon managed to take down and capture Gordon instead. Bloom then declares to Gotham that he's hidden seeds all around the city and encourages people to give themselves powers as well. And this being Gotham, people immediately do just that. The police try to take down Bloom and his Bloomin' army using their own army of Batsuits that Powers had created, in the hopes of spreading the Batman program to other cities. But Bloom somehow takes control of the suits and uses them to spread further chaos. Bloom slices up Gordon and leaves him for dead on a rooftop. He survives, partly thanks to Julia's help, but the two are then attacked by some of Bloom's acolytes, only to then be saved by the goddamn Batman. Yeah, you knew he wasn't dead. It's not explained completely, but it seems that he did really die, but was revived by, I guess, the Dionysium, and came back with no memory of who he was. It's also implied the same thing happened to the Joker, though the comic also hints that this might just be a hallucination. Without the scarring of his parents' death, Bruce doesn't have the same drive to be a Dark Avenger, and instead takes a job at a local children's center started by Lucius Fox, where he rekindles a relationship with Julie Madison, a character we met during the Zero Year, and some other flashbacks where we learned Bruce had a brief relationship with her as a teenager. Most notably, he repurposes all the equipment from Joker's Parade, which had just been dumped next to the children's center, to create an absolutely amazeballs playground for the kids. Always a hero, that Bruce Wayne. What a guy. But Bruce can't shake the feeling that something is missing, and he's helped along by Duke Thomas, who has realized Batman's true identity by this point. And, more to the point, has started his own gang of Robins as the main character of We Are Robin. Realizing the truth of who he is, Bruce returns to the Batcave, where he forces Alfred into helping him become Batman again by using a machine Bruce had created to write his memories onto another mind. This machine had first appeared in a comic Snyder did for the 75th anniversary of Batman in the New 52 Detective Comics issue 27, a story set in a far-off future where Bruce has been repeatedly cloning himself over and over again, imprinting the memories of the original Bruce onto each one, in order to ensure that the world would always have a Batman. Snyder makes that story essentially canon here by saying that current timeline Bruce was actually working on this very device, and so he uses it on himself to once again become Batman, in a swanky new outfit. Check out the purple in that cape. Classy. He also returned pretty silly, it would seem, making some pretty ridiculous comments in his first reappearance. Like when he first appears to Jim and asks him, "Who died and made you Batman?" That's a pretty good joke, I'll admit. Or telling Bloom, "I've got your flowers right here." What does that even mean, Bats? What does that even mean? So the two Batmen join forces in attempting to stop Bloom, whose goal seems to have been to use a large Hadron Collider that Powers Corp had built under the city in order to create a black hole. And he powers it by funneling the superpowers all the people of Gotham are putting into themselves with Bloom's seeds through himself as a conductor, and sends all of that energy into the black hole, I guess. I'm pretty sure it's a bunch of nonsense science, and to solve it they use some more nonsense science where Gordon uses a batarang made out of a new element Powers Corp has discovered, an element they call Batmanium. That's not a joke. Batmanium. As a super heavy superconductor, the Batmanium is able to turn the Robo Bunny suit into an antenna that sends some sort of shutdown signal to the collider, stopping Bloom's plan. Of course, they waited until after they magnetized Bloom to the Bat Blimp and crashed that into the forming black hole. Even Duke gets to play a bit of a role here, discovering that Daryl Gutierrez is actually the person who created the original seeds, and accidentally created Bloom. Daryl's fate is unclear, but we last saw him on the Bat Blimp right before it crashed into the black hole, so yeah, he's probably dead. Gordon gives up being Batman, Bruce takes fully back to the role, and the comic takes a couple issues from there to just kind of wind down as DC gears up for the rebirth of Bane. Snyder and Capullo's final issue, though, is still pretty notable, as it pays homage to another animated series episode, this time Christmas with the Joker, as Batman finds himself facing an unexpectedly quiet night in Gotham, despite a blackout. There's even a direct reference to the episode, as Batman expects a mugging, only to discover that the guy was just returning to the lady something she dropped. Bats then goes about trying to find any sign of something actually bad, including going to speak to the Court of Owls, in disguise as this woman here. He really goes all out. At one point, he also thinks he's found the epicenter of the blackout and finds someone moving around inside an office building at that location. The person, though, is an ex-member of the Whisper Gang, a gang that Batman once was beating up in an earlier issue of this series. And after that happened, this guy went home and rethought his life, starting journalism school and becoming an intern at the Gotham Gazette, sparking Batman to utter my favorite line of the whole series: "Stay in school." And then he Batmans out of there. Anyway, that's basically where the comic ends, and it's also more than past the point where we need to be getting to the breakdown. As you can probably tell from this long video, I like this comic. Snyder's writing is just so good. The way he clearly so well planned out each story beat, the way he frames his stories, the perfect flow of narration and dialogue, the references to other Batman stories, the characterizations, the use of recurring characters, and the repeated tying in of various Gotham landmarks to help make it feel like a living city, and make Gotham City itself feel like a character in the story. Just everything they do raises the bar on what it means to tell a good Batman story. And Capullo is just such a perfect partner for him. He and colorist FCO Placencia always seem to know exactly what direction to go in to really emphasize what Snyder is going for. When Snyder dips into horror, they go full demented, messy, and creepy. When Snyder wants hopeful and optimistic, the comic goes bright, clean, and colorful. And it all looks so good. From the first page of the first issue to the final page of their last issue together, the team makes an absolutely outstanding comic. But that's not to say I don't have any issues with it. For one thing, in my opinion at least, it's way too Joker heavy. We essentially get 6 story arcs in this series, along with a bunch of one-shots and tie-ins, and 3 of those story arcs are Joker story arcs. That's nearly half this comic focused on one of my personally least favorite Batman villains. Which should really go towards Snyder and Capullo's credit, because I don't mind these stories that much considering how good they are. But it's still disappointing to not get the chance to see this team's twist on more famous Batman villains. Though, if they ended up being like Mr. Freeze, I might only prove to be a little disappointed. I'm also bothered by how much this Batman fails. To his credit, Snyder seems to be fully aware of this, even giving Batman a speech about it during the Zero Year, basically making failing into Batman's manifesto. This idea that he isn't really a superhero, he's just a regular guy who never gives up, and by never giving up inspires others, like Nightwing, Red Robin, Damian, Jim Gordon, Harper Row, or Duke Thomas, to also do the right thing and never give up. And that argument certainly has some power to it, but it's also a bit painful to watch a Batman story where Batman just never really wins. He just perseveres. He fails against the Owls, he fails against Joker, he fails throughout the Zero Year, he fails against Joker again, he fails so hard that he dies and another Batman has to take his place, who then fails so badly that the original Batman has to return in order to fix things. And as much as I enjoy the overall product that this team has created, in the end, I'm not sure that's the Batman story I really wanted to read. Despite that, you know I'm still giving this series a recommendation level of very high. Whether for better or worse, this run is a defining series in the history of Batman. that's already bled influences into other media like the TV show Gotham and the Batman Arkham game series, and as such is a must-read for anyone remotely interested in Batman. The collected editions get 1. Sick-ass Joker face, 4. Creepy bloom seeds, 3. Classic Batman logos, and 2. Zur-En-Arrh Robobats. As always, that's from bad to good, though I will say in this case, that scale is only in comparison to the collections within this series. They're all actually pretty good collections. Anyway, that breaks down individually like this. Volume 10 is only 3 issues if you include the Futures End tie-in, though it does have an annual, a cover gallery, and a preview of Batman Rebirth number 1, so it's not really that bad. Volume 4 is 4 issues, though it does come with the full script for issue 21, which is cool. Volumes 2, 3, 8, and 9 are all 5 issues, though they all include a bonus cover gallery, with Volume 3 having an additional sketch gallery, and Volume 2 having an additional annual. Volumes 6 and 7 are 6 issues, each also with bonus cover and sketch galleries. Volume 1 is 7 issues with a bonus cover gallery, a sketch gallery, and a script-to-page breakdown. And Volume 5 is 8 issues with a bonus cover gallery, though sadly no sketch gallery. And that's everything. Thanks everybody for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's really long, but this is a really big deal series, and I wanted to do it justice. Just think of how much longer it would have been if I hadn't already covered all those other tie-in stories. More Batman comics are coming, so if you enjoyed this video or are interested in those future comics, be sure to click all the YouTube buttons, especially subscribe, so you can be sure to be here next time, and I hope to see you then, right here in the Comic Cave.